The bank foreclosure notice arrived on the same morning Thomas Hayes discovered his son had been sleeping in the car for 3 nights to avoid their landlord. Down to his last $700 after medical bills from his boy's emergency appendectomy wiped out everything he'd saved, Thomas made a decision that would either save them or destroy what little remained. He bought a condemned creamery at a county liquidation sale that every contractor in 3 counties refused to touch. What he found sealed behind a false wall in the basement would bring federal agents to his doorstep before dawn, armed with questions about a facility that officially never existed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Thomas Hayes sat in his rusted pickup outside the county administration building, engine off to save gas, watching the clock tick toward 9 a.m. The eviction notice lay on the passenger seat beside him, creased from being folded and unfolded a dozen times as if repetition might change the words. 7 days to vacate. He glanced in the rearview mirror at the back seat where his 11-year-old son, Marcus, pretended to sleep, one hand clutching the worn backpack that now held everything the boy owned. At 42, Thomas had never imagined being here. He'd worked construction for 20 years, steady and reliable, the kind of employee contractors fought to keep. But when Marcus got sick last spring, when the fever wouldn't break and the pain sent them racing to the emergency room at midnight, everything changed. Emergency surgery. 5 days in the hospital. Follow-up appointments. The insurance covered some of it, but not enough, never enough. The bills came in waves, each one higher than the last, and Thomas chose his son over the rent every single time. His ex-wife, Lauren, had left when Marcus was 3, claimed she couldn't handle the responsibility of motherhood, needed to find herself. The child support checks came sporadically at first, then stopped altogether when she moved to California with a man Thomas never met. For 8 years, it had been just him and Marcus against the world, and Thomas had managed. Until the medical bills. Until the landlord's patience ran out. Until construction work slowed for the season and he found himself sitting in his truck with $700 to his name and nowhere to go. The liquidation sale was a last resort, something he'd seen advertised on a bulletin board at the hardware store. County seizing abandoned commercial properties for unpaid taxes, selling them to the highest bidder. Most were worthless, burned-out shells or buildings so damaged they'd cost more to repair than they were worth. But Thomas needed a roof, any roof, and $700 might be enough to buy something nobody else wanted. "Dad?" Marcus's voice came from the back seat, tentative. "Are we really going to live in a factory or something?" Thomas turned to face his son, taking in the dark circles under the boy's eyes, the way his clothes hung looser than they should. Marcus had lost weight during the hospital stay and hadn't gained it back. Between worry about their housing situation and trying to keep his son fed on their shrinking budget, Thomas felt like he was failing at the one job that mattered. "Not a factory," Thomas said, forcing optimism into his voice. "Maybe a shop or a warehouse we can fix up. Somewhere with space for you to have your own room again." Marcus nodded, not quite convinced but willing to trust his father the way he always had. The boy grabbed his backpack and climbed out of the truck, and together they walked into the building where the auction would be held. The room was smaller than Thomas expected, just 20 folding chairs arranged in rows facing a podium where a tired-looking county clerk shuffled papers. Only about a dozen people had shown up, mostly men in work clothes who looked like contractors or property flippers. They eyed each other with the casual wariness of competitors, calculating who might bid against them on which properties. Thomas and Marcus took seats in the back row. The clerk began calling out properties one by one, and Thomas listened to the bidding with growing unease. Even the worst properties were going for more than he had. A collapsed barn sold for $1,200. A fire-damaged grocery store went for $2,800. His hope dwindled with each announcement. Then the clerk read a description that made the room go quiet. Lot 47. Former Riverside Creamery, Millbrook Township. Approximately 8,000 square feet on 2 acres. Condemned by County Health Inspector in 2019. Property sold as is with no warranties. Structure may be unsafe. Starting bid $500. Thomas sat forward. A creamery. That meant thick walls built to keep things cold, industrial plumbing, possibly equipment left behind. The condemned status explained why nobody had touched it, but structural problems could be fixed if you were willing to do the work yourself. And Thomas knew how to work. "Do I hear 500? The clerk asked, her voice suggesting she expected no response. Thomas raised his hand, heart pounding. 500. The clerk looked surprised. "We have 500 from bidder in the back. Do I hear 600? The room remained silent. Thomas could feel eyes on him, other bidders wondering what he knew that they didn't. One older contractor in the front row turned to look at him, then shook his head slightly as if warning him away. "Going once," the clerk said. "Going twice." She paused, scanning the room. "Sold for $500 to the gentleman in the back." Thomas felt Marcus grip his arm. "We got it, Dad. We got a place." "We got it," Thomas confirmed, though his mouth had gone dry. What had he just bought? Why had nobody bid against him? After the auction, Thomas approached the county clerk to complete the paperwork. She looked at him with something like pity as she slid the deed across the counter. "You know about the Riverside property?" she asked quietly. "Just what you announced," Thomas admitted. "It's condemned, but I can work with that." The clerk glanced around as if checking who might overhear. The previous owner was a man named Vincent Russo. Ran the creamery for 30 years until he died suddenly in 2019. Place has been sitting empty since. Health department condemned it for, well, they cited various violations, but between you and me, there's talk around town about why nobody wanted to touch it. "What kind of talk?" Thomas asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "Strange people coming and going at odd hours. Deliveries that didn't make sense for a dairy operation. After Russo died, there were federal agents asking questions around Millbrook, showing badges and taking photographs." She lowered her voice further. "Some folks say Russo was connected to organized crime back in the day. Others say he was running something illegal out of that creamery. Either way, most people around here figure the place is bad luck." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Thomas absorbed this information, his earlier optimism curdling into doubt. But what choice did he have? The $700 was already committed. "I appreciate the warning," he said finally, "but bad luck or not, my son and I need a roof over our heads." The clerk's expression softened. "I understand. My nephew does renovation work if you need help making the place livable. His card is in the information packet." She hesitated, then added, "Just be careful. If you find anything unusual, anything that doesn't belong in a dairy building, you might want to call the authorities before you go poking around." The drive to Millbrook Township took 40 minutes on rural roads that wound through farmland and patches of dense forest. Marcus pressed his face against the window, taking in the countryside with the resilient curiosity of a child who'd learned to find adventure in uncertainty. "Will there be other kids around?" he asked. "The township has a school," Thomas said, having researched that much at least. "We'll get you enrolled once we're settled." The Riverside Creamery sat on a slight rise overlooking what must have once been dairy pastures, now overgrown with weeds and wild grass. The building itself was larger than Thomas had imagined, a sprawling two-story structure of weathered brick with tall windows, most of them boarded up or broken. The name Riverside Creamery was still visible in faded letters across the front, though several were missing. A loading dock ran along one side, and what looked like old refrigeration units rusted quietly behind a chain-link fence. "It's huge," Marcus breathed, his earlier apprehension giving way to excitement. "Can I explore?" "Stay close to me," Thomas warned. The building might not be safe. They approached the front entrance, where a heavy padlock secured a metal door. Thomas used the keys the county clerk had provided, and the lock opened with surprising ease, as if it had been oiled recently. The door swung inward with a groan that echoed through the empty space beyond. Inside, Afternoon light filtered through gaps in the boarded windows, illuminating a vast room that must have been the main production floor. Ancient equipment lined the walls, stainless steel vats, conveyor systems, bottling machines, all covered in dust but remarkably intact. The air smelled of mildew and old concrete, but underneath it Thomas detected something else, a faint chemical odor he couldn't identify. "This place is like a museum," Marcus said, his voice echoing. "What did they make here?" "Milk, cream, cheese probably," Thomas replied, walking carefully across the floor. He tested each step, alert for weak spots or structural damage. To his surprise, the floor felt solid. The walls showed water stains but no obvious cracks. Maybe the condemned status had been overstated. They spent the next hour exploring the first floor, finding offices with desks still in place, a break room with moldy furniture, and vast storage areas that could be repurposed as living space. A stairway led to the second floor, which appeared to have been executive offices and a small apartment, possibly where the owner had lived. "We could make this work," Thomas said, more to himself than to Marcus. "Clean out the main floor, set up living quarters in the office area upstairs. It's not conventional, but it's ours." As they prepared to leave for the day, they'd need to gather their few possessions from storage and return tomorrow to start cleaning. Marcus called out from across the room. "Dad, there's another door over here." It was hidden behind these shelves. Thomas crossed to where his son stood, finding a metal door partially concealed by an old shelving unit. Unlike the other doors they'd encountered, this one looked newer, industrial grade with a serious lock. "Probably just leads to a utility room or basement," Thomas said, but curiosity made him try the keys. The third key on his ring slid into the lock, and the door opened to reveal a concrete stairway descending into darkness. "Should we check it out?" Marcus asked, equal parts nervous and excited. Thomas hesitated. The county clerk's warning echoed in his mind: "If you find anything unusual, call the authorities." But what if it was just a basement? What if there was nothing down there but old equipment or storage? "Wait here," he told Marcus. "I'll take a quick look." Using his phone's flashlight, Thomas descended the stairs carefully. At the bottom, he found himself in a short corridor that ended at another heavy door. This one wasn't locked. He pushed it open and froze. The space beyond wasn't a basement. It was a sophisticated underground facility, easily 40 feet across with a 10-foot ceiling. The walls were reinforced concrete painted institutional beige. Fluorescent lights hung from the ceiling, and when Thomas fumbled for a switch, they flickered to life, revealing a space that looked more like a command center than anything that belonged under a creamery. The room contained multiple workstations with old computer equipment, filing cabinets, communication gear, and along one wall, what appeared to be a small medical station with an examination table and supply cabinets. But what caught Thomas's attention was the far corner, where a living area had been set up: a bed, a small kitchenette, a bathroom, and a television mounted on the wall. This wasn't storage. This was a place where someone had lived, hidden beneath the creamery for reasons Thomas couldn't begin to guess. His heart hammering, Thomas moved deeper into the facility. On one of the desks, he found a nameplate: Special Agent Frank Caruso, U.S. Marshal Service. A corkboard on the wall held photographs of various people, some marked with red X's, others with dates and locations noted beneath them. "Oh God," Thomas whispered. This wasn't organized crime. This was something official. Something federal. "Dad?" Marcus's voice came from the stairs. "Are you okay?" "Stay up there," Thomas called, more sharply than he intended. But his son's footsteps were already descending. Marcus appeared in the doorway, eyes widening as he took in the underground facility. "Whoa! What is this place?" "I don't know," Thomas admitted, though his mind was racing. "The U.S. Marshal Service. Witness protection. This must have been a safe house, hidden beneath the creamery as cover." Vincent Russo hadn't been running a criminal operation, he'd been protecting federal witnesses. As Thomas tried to process this discovery, his eye caught something else. On another desk sat a sealed envelope with words written across it in precise handwriting: To whoever finds this, read immediately. With trembling hands, Thomas picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside was a letter dated just weeks before Vincent Russo's death. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've found the facility. My name is Vincent Russo, and for 33 years I provided safe refuge to individuals under federal protection. This was an off-book operation, known only to a small number of trusted agents. The official safe houses had been compromised too many times. People died. So we created this, a place so ordinary, so overlooked, that nobody would think to look here. The facility is clean. All my witnesses were successfully relocated or testified and entered permanent protection. But there's something you need to know. One file remains open. One person never made it to testimony. Their location, their new identity, everything they knew, it's all documented in the red folder in the locked drawer of my desk. If federal agents come asking, give it to them. But if anyone else comes, anyone at all, you need to understand that people have killed to find this information, and they won't stop just because I'm gone. Thomas's blood ran cold. He looked at Marcus, standing wide-eyed beside him, and realized the magnitude of what they'd stumbled into. This wasn't just an unusual property. It was a secret that had been buried with Vincent Russo, and now it belonged to them. "Dad," Marcus said quietly, "should we call the police?" Before Thomas could answer, a sound echoed from above, the groan of the front door opening. Then footsteps, multiple sets, moving through the main floor of the creamery with the measured pace of people who knew how to search a building. Thomas grabbed Marcus's arm, pulling him back against the wall, and listened as voices filtered down from above. Clear. Professional. Searching. "Check the basement," a voice commanded. "The clerk said someone bought the property this morning. If they found the facility, we need to know." Thomas's mind raced. These weren't random intruders. They were here looking for exactly what he'd found. And whoever they were, they'd moved fast, too fast to be coincidence. He looked at his son's frightened face, at the facility around them, at Vincent Russo's letter still clutched in his hand. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was only one exit, and it led directly toward the people searching above. The footsteps were getting closer, descending toward the hidden door they'd left open. In seconds, whoever was up there would find the stairs. Would find them. Thomas made a decision. He pressed Marcus behind one of the filing cabinets, whispering urgently, "Stay quiet no matter what happens. Don't come out until I tell you." Then he stepped forward, Russo's letter folded in his pocket, and waited for whoever was coming to reach the bottom of the stairs. Because whatever came next, whatever he'd accidentally purchased for his last $700, he was about to discover that some secrets demanded a price higher than money. The footsteps reached the hidden door, and Thomas heard it swing open. Light spilled down the concrete stairs. "We know you're down there," a voice called out, calm and authoritative. "Come up slowly with your hands visible. Nobody needs to get hurt today." Thomas swallowed hard, glanced once more at where Marcus was hidden, and called back, "I'm coming up. I just bought this property." "I didn't know," save the explanations, the voice interrupted. "Just come up. Now." As Thomas started toward the stairs, his hands raised, he wondered if the county clerk's warning had come too late. If Vincent Russo's secret was about to consume him and his son. If the desperate decision that was supposed to save them had instead put them in danger they couldn't possibly understand. Behind the filing cabinet, Marcus held his breath, his father's last words echoing in his mind, "Stay quiet no matter what happens." And somewhere in the red folder in Vincent Russo's locked desk, a name waited in the darkness, someone's new identity, someone's hidden location, someone whose life depended on that information never being found. The facility's lights hummed overhead as Thomas climbed the stairs toward the voices above, leaving his son alone in the underground room where secrets had been kept for 33 years. Where one final secret still waited to be uncovered. Thomas emerged from the stairwell into the filtered afternoon light of the creamery floor, hands raised, pulse hammering in his ears. 3 men stood waiting, spread in a tactical formation that spoke of professional training. They wore dark civilian clothes, jeans, work jackets, but their bearing was unmistakably law enforcement. The closest one, a man in his 50s with silver threading through dark hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent years working outdoors, lowered the hand that had been resting near his hip. "Thomas Hayes?" the man asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "That's right," Thomas replied, keeping his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his gut. "I bought this property at auction this morning. Legal purchase. I've got the deed in my truck." The silver-haired man exchanged glances with his companions before pulling out a leather credential case. "I'm Deputy Marshal Frank Delacroix. These are Deputies Chen and Morrison. We're with the U.S. Marshal's Service." He studied Thomas with sharp gray eyes that had seen too much to be easily fooled. "You're telling me you bought the Riverside Creamery without knowing what was beneath it?" "I needed a place for my son and me to live," Thomas said, letting exhaustion creep into his voice because it was true. The county was liquidating abandoned properties. This was all I could afford. I didn't know about any basement facility until 20 minutes ago. Deputy Chen, a younger woman with her black hair pulled back severely, moved closer. "Where's your son now?" The question felt like a trap. Thomas's instinct was to protect Marcus, to keep him hidden, but lying to federal agents seemed like a fast path to worse trouble. "He's here. He's safe. He didn't see anything down there. I made him wait upstairs." It was a partial truth, the best Thomas could manage. Let them think Marcus was somewhere on the main floor, not hidden in the facility itself. Morrison, the third marshal, had been searching the creamery's main floor during this exchange. He returned shaking his head. "No sign of the kid up here, Frank." Delacroix's expression hardened. "Mr. Hayes, I'm going to need you to be straight with me. Your son's life might depend on it." "Where is he?" The words sent ice through Thomas's veins. "What do you mean his life depends on it? We just stumbled onto this place. We don't know anything." "That's exactly the problem," Delacroix said, his voice carrying a weight that made Thomas understand this man had delivered bad news to families before, had seen what happened when innocent people got caught in situations they didn't understand. "Vincent Russo died 5 years ago. The facility beneath this building was supposed to have been cleared and decommissioned. Instead, it got buried in paperwork, forgotten in a system that handles thousands of witness relocations. We only learned someone bought the property when our monitoring system sent an alert 2 hours ago." Thomas felt the world tilting beneath him. "Monitoring system? You've been watching this place?" "Passive sensors on the facility entrance," Chen explained. "They notify us if anyone accesses the underground area. Standard procedure for decommissioned safe houses." Her eyes narrowed. "But here's what worries us, Mr. Hayes. Our system shows the facility door was open yesterday. 24 hours before you bought this property. Someone else has been here." The implication hit Thomas like a physical blow. "You think someone knew the facility was here? That they were waiting for it to be sold? Or they've been searching for it for years," Delacroix said. "Vincent Russo ran one of the most secure off-book operations in the Marshal's Service. For 3 decades, he kept witnesses safe when the official system had been compromised. But there's one file that was never closed. One witness who disappeared before they could testify against a criminal organization that's still very much active." Morrison pulled out a tablet, turning it to show Thomas a photograph of a young woman, maybe 25, with dark eyes and a nervous smile. Elena Vega. She was a bookkeeper for the Costello family out of Chicago. Irish mob with connections from Boston to New Orleans. 5 years ago, she agreed to testify about their money laundering operations. She was brought here, to this facility, while we prepared her for trial. Then Vincent Russo died suddenly, heart attack, officially, and in the confusion of his death, Elena vanished. No trace. No body. No evidence of foul play. Just gone. The Costellos have been looking for her ever since," Chen added. "Or more specifically, looking for proof she's dead. Because if she's alive, she's a loose end. Her testimony could still destroy them." Thomas's mouth had gone dry. And you think information about her is still down there? After 5 years? Vincent Russo was meticulous, Delacroix said. He documented everything. If Elena is alive, if he helped her disappear on purpose, he would have left a record. Insurance, or maybe just because he couldn't help himself. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. The Costellos have people everywhere, Mr. Hayes. Lawyers, businessmen, cops. If they learn this facility has been exposed, if they even suspect that information about Elena might surface, they'll come. And they won't care who's in the way. The reality of what Thomas had purchased with his last $700 was becoming horrifyingly clear. Not just a building, but a target. A secret that powerful people had killed to protect and would kill to uncover. My son, Thomas said, voice rough. I need to get him and leave. Right now. That's not how this works, Morrison said, moving to block the exit. We need to secure the facility. And we need to know exactly what you saw down there. I saw offices, equipment, living quarters, Thomas replied, frustration mixing with fear. And I found a letter from Russo. He said one file remained open. Said if anyone came asking about it, we should call the authorities. He pulled the folded letter from his pocket, holding it out. That's you, right? You're the authorities? Delacroix took the letter, reading it quickly. His expression shifted, surprise, then something darker. He mentions a red folder in his desk. Did you find it? Thomas shook his head. I found the letter, heard you coming, and came upstairs. I didn't have time to search for anything else. It was true, though the truth felt insufficient against the intensity of Delacroix's stare. The marshal studied him for a long moment, weighing something Thomas couldn't see. Chen, Morrison, secure the facility, Delacroix ordered. Full sweep. I want every file, every piece of paper, everything Russo left behind. He turned back to Thomas. You're going to take me to your son. And then we're going to have a longer conversation about your extremely unfortunate timing. Thomas led Delacroix back toward the hidden door, his mind racing. Marcus was still down there, hiding. What would the marshals do when they found him? More importantly, what would they do if Marcus had found something he shouldn't have? As they descended the concrete stairs, Thomas called out, Marcus, it's okay. You can come out now. These are federal agents. They're here to help. Silence answered him. Thomas's heart clenched. Marcus? They reached the bottom of the stairs, entering the facility where fluorescent lights still hummed overhead. Chen and Morrison fanned out, beginning their systematic search, while Thomas moved toward the filing cabinets where he'd hidden his son. Marcus, please, Thomas said, letting desperation into his voice because it was real. I need to know you're safe. A small sound came from behind the cabinet, the shuffle of sneakers on concrete. Then Marcus emerged, his face pale, clutching his backpack against his chest like a shield. His eyes were wide and frightened, but he walked straight to his father without hesitation. Thomas pulled his son against him, one hand on the back of Marcus's head, relief flooding through him so intensely it made his knees weak. You're okay. Everything's going to be okay. I stayed quiet like you said, Marcus whispered, his voice muffled against Thomas's jacket. But Dad, I found something. Thomas tensed. What do you mean? Marcus pulled back slightly, unzipping his backpack. From inside, he withdrew a red folder, its edges worn, its contents thick with documents. It was in the desk drawer. I heard you talking about it, about the red folder. When those men came down, I thought maybe I should hide it. In case they were the bad guys. Time seemed to suspend. Thomas stared at the folder in his son's hands, the folder Vincent Russo had written about, the one containing information that people had killed for, and understood that whatever small hope they'd had of walking away from this situation had just evaporated. Delacroix had gone very still. Son, I need you to give me that folder. Right now. But Chen had noticed something else. She stood at Vincent Russo's desk, staring at the open drawer, her expression tight. Frank, the drawer was forced. Lock's been broken. This wasn't the kid, this happened before. Morrison confirmed it with a quick inspection. She's right. Someone broke into this desk recently. Within the last day or two, based on the metal shavings. The implications crashed over Thomas like cold water. Someone had been here before them. Had broken into the desk looking for exactly what Marcus now held. Had found the folder, or had they? If they'd taken it, why would it still be here? Unless Russo had copies, Delacroix said, thinking aloud. He was paranoid enough to run an off-book operation for 3 decades. He might have kept duplicates. He looked at Marcus with an expression that was both gentle and urgent. Son, where exactly did you find that folder? Marcus pointed at the desk. It was in the drawer. Behind some other files. It wasn't hidden or anything, just there. Chen moved to search the rest of the desk, her movements quick and efficient. Within minutes, she'd found what they'd all feared, evidence that the desk had been thoroughly searched. File folders emptied and poorly replaced, papers out of order, the methodical disruption of someone looking for something specific. They didn't find it, Morrison said. Whoever was here missed it. Or maybe they took what they thought was the right folder and missed the actual one. Delacroix reached out slowly, and Marcus, with a glance at his father, handed over the red folder. The marshal opened it carefully, scanning the first few pages, and his face grew progressively more grave. This is it, he said quietly. Elena Vega's complete file. New identity, social security number, address, employment history. Everything someone would need to find her. He closed the folder, his jaw tight. Vincent Russo didn't just help her disappear. He gave her a completely new life, documented thoroughly enough to be legitimate but hidden from the official system. Is she still alive? Chen asked. According to this, she was 3 months ago, Delacroix replied. Russo kept updating the file right until his death. There are notes, observations, check-ins. He was protecting her even after the case went cold. He paused, something like respect crossing his features. He really believed in what he was doing. Thomas felt Marcus lean against him, tired and confused and frightened by events he couldn't fully understand. So what happens now? Thomas asked. You have what you came for. Can my son and I leave? It's not that simple, Delacroix said, and there was genuine regret in his voice. Someone broke into this facility looking for that folder. They're still out there, and they now know the location has been compromised. They might not have found what they were looking for, but they know it exists. And they'll be watching to see who comes next. You think they're watching us right now? Thomas asked, instinctively pulling Marcus closer. I think they're watching this property, Morrison said. We came in unmarked vehicles, standard clothes. But you drove here in your truck. You've got a moving violation sticker on your rear window. Any decent investigator could run your plates, find out who you are, where you live. He paused. Except you don't live anywhere anymore, do you? The observation felt like a punch to the gut. We were evicted. This is all we have now. Delacroix exchanged looks with his team, and Thomas saw the unspoken communication pass between them, the recognition that this situation had just become infinitely more complicated. They couldn't just take the folder and leave. Thomas and Marcus knew too much, had seen too much, and had nowhere to go where the Costellos couldn't find them if they decided the father and son were loose ends worth tying up. There's a protocol for this, Chen said. Civilian exposure to sensitive witness protection information. We can offer temporary protective custody while we assess the threat level. You want us to go into witness protection? Thomas asked, disbelief sharpening his voice. We didn't witness anything except federal incompetence. You lost track of this facility, you let it get compromised, and now you want to upend our lives because you failed to do your job? The words came out harsher than he'd intended, fueled by exhaustion and fear and the crushing weight of having made what he thought was a desperate but simple decision, buy a cheap building, only to have it spiral into something that threatened everything he had left. Delacroix didn't rise to the anger. You're right. This is our failure. Vincent Russo operated outside proper channels for good reasons, but when he died, the system should have caught it. Should have secured this facility, closed out his cases properly. We failed Elena Vega by losing track of her. And now we've failed you by letting you purchase a property that should never have been up for sale. He met Thomas's eyes with something that might have been respect. But being right doesn't make you safe, Mr. Hayes. Your son found a folder that a criminal organization has been hunting for 5 years. They've killed to keep Elena Vega silent. They won't hesitate to kill anyone they think might lead them to her. Then take the folder and destroy it, Thomas said. Tell whoever's watching that you recovered it, that Elena Vega is confirmed dead, case closed. Let them think their secret is safe. They won't believe it, Morrison said. These aren't amateurs. They'll want proof. And more than that, they'll want to clean up any potential witnesses. That includes you and your son. Marcus had been silent through this exchange, pressed against his father's side, but now he spoke up in a small voice. Are we in danger because I found the folder? Did I do something wrong? Thomas felt his heart break a little at the question. No, buddy. You didn't do anything wrong. You tried to protect it, which was brave. This is just a bad situation that nobody could have predicted. Actually, Chen said, still searching through the facility, there might be another option. She'd found something in one of the other filing cabinets, a thick expandable folder marked with dates going back 30 years. Russo documented every witness who came through here. Dates, new identities, outcomes. If we can verify that Elena Vega successfully integrated into her new life, that she poses no threat to the Costellos because she's moved on and has no intention of testifying, they won't care, Delacroix interrupted. As long as she's alive and has the knowledge she has, she's a threat. Their organization has been weakened by other prosecutions, but the Costello family is still operational. Elena's testimony could finish what other cases started. They need her silenced permanently. Unless someone else finishes it first, Morrison said slowly, an idea forming. We've been building a separate case against the Costellos for the past 2 years. Different angle, different witnesses. It's not as comprehensive as what Elena could provide, but it's enough to get indictments. If we accelerate that case, move on the Costellos before they can find Elena, that could take months, Chin objected. Legal preparation, coordination with multiple agencies. Meanwhile, Mr. Hayes and his son are exposed. Thomas listened to them debate his fate, his son's safety, as if it were a tactical problem to be solved rather than their lives hanging in the balance. He looked around the facility, at the living quarters where Elena Vega had hidden, at the filing cabinets containing decades of secrets, at the desk where Vincent Russo had meticulously documented his off-book operation. This place had been built to protect people, and instead it had become a trap. There's another way, Thomas said, cutting through their discussion. All 3 marshals turned to look at him. You said whoever broke in here yesterday was looking for that folder. They didn't find it, which means they might come back. Might try again. That's exactly why you need protection, Delacroix said. No, listen, Thomas pressed. They're looking for information about Elena Vega. What if you let them find it? What if you use this facility as bait? Chen shook her head. We can't risk Elena's location getting out. Even as bait, it's too dangerous. Then don't use her real location, Thomas said. Russo documented everything, right? He'd know how to create a false trail. Give them information that leads nowhere, that makes them think Elena is somewhere she's not. Let them chase ghosts while you build your case. Morrison was nodding slowly. A controlled leak. We'd need to make it look legitimate, like they discovered it themselves rather than us feeding it to them. But it could work. And what happens to Mr. Hayes and his son while we're setting this trap? Chen asked pointedly. They're still exposed. Still vulnerable. Thomas met Delacroix's eyes. We stay here. In the Creamery. It's what we needed anyway, a place to live. And if the Costellos come looking, you'll be ready. You want to use yourself as bait, Delacroix said flatly. You and your son. That's insane. No more insane than putting us in witness protection or sending us away with nothing when we've got nowhere to go, Thomas countered. This building is ours. We have a right to be here. And if your presence here looks official, like you're securing a compromised facility, it won't seem suspicious. But if we disappear suddenly, whoever's watching will know something happened. They'll know the folder is gone and escalate. The marshals exchanged looks again, that silent communication born of years working together. Thomas could see them weighing the options, none of them good, all of them risky. Finally, Delacroix spoke. If, and this is a very big if, we consider this approach, you and your son would need to follow our protocols exactly. No arguments, no independence. You'd be living in an active operation zone. We're homeless, Thomas said bluntly. Living in an active operation zone with federal protection is better than sleeping in my truck while criminals hunt for us. Marcus tugged on his father's jacket. Dad, I'm scared. Thomas knelt down to his son's eye level. I know, buddy. I am too. But sometimes the only way through fear is straight ahead. We can't run from this. So we stay, we help these people do their job, and we trust that Vincent Russo built this place strong enough to keep us safe like it kept others safe. He watched his son process this, saw the fear warring with trust, with the resilience that Marcus had developed through years of instability. Finally, the boy nodded. Okay, Marcus whispered. But promise you won't let anything happen to us. It was a promise Thomas had no right to make, no guarantee he could keep. But he made it anyway because that's what fathers did. I promise. Delacroix watched this exchange, something shifting in his expression. All right. We'll need to run this up the chain, get authorization. But assuming we get approval, here's how this works. We secure the facility completely. No one in or out without our clearance. We establish surveillance around the property. And we create a false trail, information about Elena Vega that leads the Costellos away from her real location while we accelerate our case against them. How long? Thomas asked. Weeks, maybe a month if we're lucky, Morrison said. We've got most of the pieces already. Just need to tie them together, coordinate with federal prosecutors, get the indictments sealed and ready to execute. Chin had been quiet, but now she spoke up. The creamery needs to look operational. If it sits empty, that's suspicious. If armed marshals are visibly present, that's suspicious. But if a father and son are renovating it, turning it into a home, that's a reasonable cover. You want us to actually live here? Marcus asked, his voice small but curious. Like, fix it up and everything? It would be the best cover, Chin confirmed. And we'd help. Make sure you have what you need. Power, water, security systems disguised as renovation work. Thomas looked around the facility one more time, then up at the ceiling toward the creamery above. He'd bought this place with his last $700 hoping for shelter. Instead, he'd bought into a conspiracy, a threat, a federal operation. But beneath all that, it was still what he'd needed, a roof, walls, space for his son to have a bedroom again. All right, he said finally. We'll do it. But I need something from you. What's that? Delacroix asked. When this is over, when the Costellos are arrested and Elena Vega is truly safe, I want this place cleared. I want the facility sealed or removed. I want my son to grow up in a home, not on top of a crime scene. He paused. Vincent Russo protected people here for 30 years. That's noble. But it's over now. Let this place be just a creamery again. Just a building. Just home. Delacroix extended his hand. You have my word. When this is finished, the facility gets decommissioned properly. Whatever you want done with it, we'll make it happen. Thomas shook his hand, feeling the weight of the agreement settle over him like a mantle he hadn't asked for but would bear nonetheless. Behind him, Marcus gripped his backpack, the red folder now in federal hands, its secrets no longer their burden to carry. As the marshals began coordinating their operation, Thomas guided his son back up the concrete stairs, leaving the underground facility behind. They emerged into the fading afternoon light of the creamery's main floor, where shadows stretched long across dusty equipment and broken windows. "Is it going to be okay, Dad?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Thomas looked down at his son, at this brave, resilient boy who'd hidden in the dark when told to, who'd grabbed a folder thinking to protect it, who'd agreed to stay in a dangerous place because his father asked. Marcus deserved certainty, deserved safety, deserved more than Thomas could currently guarantee. But he deserved honesty too. "I don't know," Thomas admitted. "But we're together. And we're not giving up. That's gotta count for something." Marcus nodded, accepting this qualified truth with the wisdom of a child who'd learned that life offered few guarantees. Together they walked to the broken windows and looked out over the 2 acres of overgrown land that now belonged to them, land that held secrets beneath its surface, land that had been chosen specifically for its isolation and anonymity, land that would either become their sanctuary or their grave. The sun was setting behind the distant tree line, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust. Somewhere in the growing darkness, people were watching. Waiting. Planning their next move in a game Thomas and Marcus hadn't known they were playing. But Vincent Russo had chosen this ground carefully, had built his refuge with skill and foresight. If they were going to make a stand, this was as good a place as any. Thomas put his arm around Marcus's shoulders as full darkness settled over the Riverside Creamery. Behind them, Deputy Marshal Delacroix was already making calls, setting the machinery of federal protection into motion. Around them, the old building creaked and groaned, settling into the night like it had for decades, keeping its secrets close. And beneath their feet, in the concrete tomb where Elena Vega had once hidden from people who wanted her dead, the facility waited, patient, silent, and ready to serve its purpose one final time. The first week passed in a strange rhythm of normalcy layered over tension. By day, Thomas and Marcus worked to make the creamery habitable, scrubbing decades of grime from floors, replacing broken windows, patching the roof where rain had leaked through. By night, Deputy Marshal Chen monitored surveillance feeds from equipment disguised as renovation supplies, watching for anyone who showed too much interest in the property. Thomas discovered that physical labor helped quiet the constant anxiety humming beneath his skin. The work was familiar, comforting in its simplicity. Measure, cut, install. Problems with clear solutions and visible progress. Marcus threw himself into the project with the adaptability of childhood, claiming the second-floor apartment as his own and spending hours planning how he'd arrange furniture they didn't yet own. "We could put shelves here," Marcus said one afternoon, gesturing at a wall in what would become his bedroom. "For books and stuff. And maybe paint it blue instead of this gross yellow." Thomas smiled, measuring the window frame for new glass. "Blue sounds good. We'll go to the hardware store this weekend, pick out paint together." It was a strange performance, father and son playing house while federal agents worked in shifts in the facility below, preparing a trap that would either save them or expose them to greater danger. But the performance became real in small increments. The windows they replaced actually kept out the draft. The kitchen they cleaned actually became functional. The creamery was transforming from condemned building to home not because they were pretending, but because they had no choice except to commit fully to the illusion. Delacroix proved to be more than just a marshal executing an operation. He understood construction, helped Thomas shore up the sagging loading dock, taught Marcus how to properly swing a hammer. In quieter moments, usually late at night when Marcus was asleep and the other marshals were monitoring surveillance, he and Thomas would sit on the newly repaired front steps and talk about the weight of protection. Vincent Russo believed in second chances, Delacroix said one such night, his voice low in the darkness. That's why he ran this place off the books. The official system is good, but it's bureaucratic. Slow. And sometimes compromised. Russo saw people fall through the cracks, saw witnesses die because the system failed them. So he built something better, even if it meant working alone. Sounds lonely, Thomas observed. It was, Delacroix confirmed. I met him twice, back before my time with witness protection. He was dedicated but isolated. No family, no close friends. Just this place and the people he protected. He paused. When we learned he'd died and the facility had gone dark, I wondered what happened to all that devotion. Whether it disappeared with him or whether it left something behind. Thomas thought about the letter Russo had written, the meticulous documentation, the care taken to give Elena Vega not just safety but a complete new life. He left behind proof that one person can make a difference. Even if the system doesn't recognize it. You sound like you admire him. I admire anyone who keeps fighting when they could give up, Thomas said. Though I wish his legacy hadn't landed on my son and me. Delacroix was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, you're handling this better than most would. The Bureau's seen civilians exposed to witness protection information before. Usually they panic, demand immediate relocation, refuse to cooperate. You're choosing to stay in the line of fire to protect someone you've never met. That takes a particular kind of courage. Or a particular kind of desperation, Thomas countered. We had nowhere else to go. Maybe, Delacroix allowed. But desperation doesn't always breed nobility. Sometimes it just breeds survival at any cost. What you're doing, making this a home for Marcus while helping us protect Elena Vega, that's something more. The conversation stayed with Thomas as days turned into weeks. The creamery continued its transformation. They'd restored power and running water, cleared the main production floor, even begun exploring possibilities for what to do with the massive space once the operation concluded. Marcus had started attending the local school, a small brick building 15 minutes away where teachers were kind and classmates curious about the new kid living in the old Russo place. They say it's haunted, Marcus reported one evening, carefully painting his bedroom wall the blue he'd chosen. Tyler's grandpa says weird stuff happened here back in the day. Secret deliveries, strange cars. But I told them my dad's just fixing it up and there's nothing weird about it. Thomas felt the lie settle over them like dust. There was everything weird about their situation, but Marcus had learned to separate truth from cover story with an ease that both impressed and worried his father. An 11-year-old shouldn't have to become fluent in deception. Chen seemed to sense his concern. She'd taken to checking in on them during her shifts, ostensibly to monitor the surveillance equipment but really, Thomas suspected, to make sure they were holding up under the strain. He's resilient, she said one afternoon, watching Marcus through the window as the boy explored the overgrown property. Kids adapt to situations adults struggle with. He'll be okay. Will he? Thomas asked. When this is over, when you close the facility and move on, will he remember this as the time his father kept him safe? Or the time his father used him as bait? Chen turned to face him fully. You didn't use him as bait. You made an impossible choice in an impossible situation. And for what it's worth, I think you made the right one. Marcus is here, with you, in a place you own, building something real. That matters. The validation helped, but didn't entirely erase the guilt. At night, Thomas would lie awake in the small apartment they'd claimed as their living quarters, listening to Marcus breathe in the next room, and wonder what invisible scars this experience was leaving on his son. 3 weeks into their residence, Morrison brought news during his evening shift. The false trail is working. We've got intelligence suggesting Costello operatives followed the information we leaked. They're focused on a location in Nevada now, completely wrong direction from Elena's actual whereabouts. So it's over? Thomas asked, hope and disbelief warring in his chest. Not yet, Morrison cautioned. They'll verify the Nevada lead, realize it's false, potentially backtrace to figure out how they were misdirected. But it buys us time. Our case against the Costello organization is solid. Federal prosecutors are preparing indictments. Another week, maybe 2, and we move. Another week or 2 felt simultaneously too long and not long enough. Thomas had begun to find peace in the routine they'd established. The work on the creamery, the quiet evenings with Marcus, even the strange camaraderie with the marshals who rotated through, watching over them like guardian angels with badges and tactical training. But peace built on borrowed time was fragile, and Thomas knew better than to trust it completely. The crack came on a Thursday evening. Marcus was at the kitchen table doing homework, Thomas was repairing a section of the porch railing, and Delacroix was in the facility below when Chen's voice came urgent through the radio. "Frank, we've got movement. 2 vehicles approaching on the access road. Unknown make and model. They're driving slow, like they're surveying." Thomas's hands stilled on the railing. Through the kitchen window, he could see Marcus bent over his math worksheet, oblivious. Every instinct screamed to grab his son and run, but Delacroix's voice came back steady through the radio. "Hold positions. Let them survey. They're probably confirming the location before committing resources. Hayes, keep working on that railing. Don't change your routine." It took every ounce of control Thomas possessed to pick up the hammer again, to drive another nail while vehicles that might contain people who wanted him dead crawled past his property. The sound of engines grew louder, then faded as they continued down the road. "They're gone," Chen reported. "Didn't stop, didn't appear to take photographs. Just a slow pass." "Reconnaissance," Morrison's voice added. "They're being careful. Probably checking whether the property looks abandoned or occupied before making a move." Thomas set down the hammer, hands trembling now that the immediate threat had passed. Through the window, Marcus looked up from his homework, noticed his father standing motionless, and called out, "Dad? You okay?" "I'm fine, buddy," Thomas managed. "Just thinking about what to fix next." That night, after Marcus was asleep, the marshals convened in the facility for a strategy session. Thomas joined them, unwilling to pretend he wasn't part of this anymore. "They're getting close," Delacroix said without preamble. "The Nevada lead is going cold, which means they're expanding their search. Someone did their homework, traced the property sale, probably figured out that Russo's safe house was never properly decommissioned." "How long until they move?" Thomas asked. "Could be days, could be hours," Chen said. "These aren't impulsive criminals. They'll plan carefully, wait for optimal conditions. Then we accelerate our timeline," Delacroix decided. "Morrison, contact the prosecutors. Tell them we need those indictments ready to execute within 48 hours. If the Costellos are converging on this location, we use that. Catch them in the act of attempting to breach a federal facility." "You want to let them come here?" Thomas asked, disbelief sharpening his voice. "While my son is sleeping upstairs. We won't let them reach the building," Delacroix promised. "We'll have additional agents positioned around the property. The moment they enter the perimeter, we take them down. But we need them to commit to the action. Otherwise they'll scatter, regroup, try again somewhere we're not expecting." Thomas looked at the faces around him, Chen with her analytical calm, Morrison with his tactical focus, Delacroix with the weight of command in his eyes. They were asking him to trust them with everything he had left in the world. "If anything happens to Marcus," he began. "It won't," Delacroix interrupted. "But if you want, we can extract you both tonight. Put you in protective custody somewhere safe while we handle this." It was a test, Thomas realized. An offer of safety that would also mean abandoning the trap they'd set, the plan they'd committed to. Running would save them in the short term but leave Elena Vega vulnerable, leave the Costellos free to hunt another day. "We stay," Thomas said. "But I'm armed and I'm awake. If anyone gets past your perimeter, they'll find out what happens when you threaten a father protecting his son." Delacroix nodded slowly. "Chen will stay upstairs with you. Morrison and I will be in the facility with backup teams positioned in the woods. We've got thermal imaging, motion sensors, the full array. Nothing gets close without us knowing." The next 2 days crawled past with excruciating slowness. Thomas maintained the facade of normalcy, drove Marcus to school, worked on the creamery, cooked dinner, helped with homework. But underneath, tension coiled tighter with each passing hour. Additional marshals arrived in unmarked vehicles, taking positions around the property. Surveillance equipment multiplied, hidden in renovation supplies and natural features. On Saturday morning, the federal prosecutors gave their confirmation. Indictments were ready. Teams were positioned in Chicago, Boston, and New Orleans, prepared to simultaneously raid Costello operations. They were just waiting for the signal, for the family to make a move that would justify immediate action. That signal came Saturday night. Thomas had just finished reading with Marcus, had tucked his son into the blue bedroom that finally felt like it belonged to a child rather than a condemned building. He'd returned to the kitchen where Chin monitored feeds on a laptop disguised as a work computer when Delacroix's voice came through her earpiece. "We've got activity. 4 vehicles, approaching from different directions. They're coordinating." Chen's expression went hard and professional. "Hayes, I need you to go to Marcus's room. Lock the door. Stay away from windows. Do not come out until I personally give the all-clear." Thomas moved without argument, crossing to Marcus's room and slipping inside. His son stirred as the door closed. "Dad?" "Just checking on you," Thomas said, keeping his voice calm. "Go back to sleep." But Marcus was already sitting up, reading something in his father's face. "They're coming, aren't they? The bad people." There was no point in lying. "Yes. But the marshals are ready. We're going to be fine." Marcus nodded, accepting this with the trust children give to parents even when the parents aren't certain themselves. Thomas sat on the edge of the bed, one hand on his son's shoulder, listening to sounds from outside, the whisper of vehicles approaching, the absolute silence of federal agents moving into position. Then chaos compressed into seconds. The sharp crack of breaking glass from the main floor. Shouting voices identifying themselves as U.S. Marshals. More shouting, defiant and desperate, from the intruders. The bark of gunfire, brief and controlled, followed by commands to get down, to show hands, to not move. Marcus pressed against his father, trembling. Thomas held him close, counting seconds that felt like hours, waiting for either Chen's all-clear or the sound of footsteps approaching their door with violent intent. Chen's voice came first. "Clear. Suspects in custody. Hayes, you can come out." Thomas opened the door to find the marshal standing in the hallway, her weapon still drawn but pointed safely down. "It's over." 4 suspects attempted to breach the facility. All in custody, no casualties except 2 injuries from non-lethal takedowns. The relief was so intense it made Thomas's knees weak. "They're caught? It's really over?" "The indictments are being executed now," Chin confirmed. Simultaneous raids across 3 cities. By morning, the Costello organization will be dismantled. Elena Vega is safe. Marcus appeared in the doorway, wide-eyed. "Did you catch the bad guys?" Chin smiled, the first truly unguarded expression Thomas had seen from her. "We caught them. Thanks to your dad's bravery and your patience." Over the following days, details emerged. The 4 men who'd attempted to breach the Creamery were mid-level Costello operatives, armed with stolen federal credentials they'd planned to use to access the facility. The simultaneous raids had netted 18 arrests including 3 family leaders. Evidence seized would tie the organization to murders, money laundering, drug trafficking, and witness intimidation. The case would take years to prosecute fully, but the spine of the criminal empire had been broken. Delacroix delivered the news personally on Tuesday morning. Elena Vega has been notified. She's been living quietly in Oregon, married, working as an accountant for a nonprofit. Russo's documentation let us verify her location and security. She'll never need to testify now, we've got enough evidence from the raids, but she wanted me to thank you. She said to tell you that strangers protecting strangers is how the world stays good." Thomas stood on the porch of the Creamery, looking out over the property that had nearly cost them everything but had instead become the foundation of something unexpected. The facility beneath their feet would be sealed within the month, its purpose fulfilled, its secrets finally laid to rest. "What happens to us now?" he asked. "You keep living," Delacroix said simply. "The property is yours. The threat is neutralized. You and Marcus build whatever life you want here." After the marshals departed, after the surveillance equipment was removed and the property returned to just being a creamery again, Thomas and Marcus stood together in the vast main production floor. Sunlight streamed through windows they'd replaced, illuminating a space that held decades of history, milk and cream processed into sustenance, witnesses protected and given new lives, secrets buried and finally exhumed. What should we do with all this space? Marcus asked. Thomas considered. The practical answer was to convert it for some profitable use, storage, workshop, rental space. But as he looked at his son, at this boy who'd been so resilient through circumstances no child should face, another possibility emerged. What if we made it a community center? Thomas suggested. The town is small, probably doesn't have many gathering places. We could set up basketball courts, meeting rooms, space for after-school programs. Marcus's eyes lit up. That would be cool. Like, something for everyone. Something for everyone, Thomas agreed. A place that helps people instead of hiding them. Vincent Russo protected people here for 30 years. Maybe we can honor that by making it a place that serves the community openly. It took months to make that vision real. Thomas used the last of his savings and a small business loan to begin the conversion. Word spread through Millbrook Township about the new kid and his single father turning the old Russo place into something useful. Volunteers appeared, contractors offering discounted services, townspeople donating equipment and furniture, even the county clerk, Mrs. Henshaw, who brought a plaque commemorating Vincent Russo's quiet service to his community without specifying what that service had been. The Riverside Community Center opened on a Saturday in spring. Marcus had invited his entire school class. Local families brought food for a potluck. An impromptu basketball tournament broke out on the court Thomas had installed. For the first time since purchasing the property, Thomas felt the weight lift, not entirely, but enough to breathe freely. Delacroix appeared that afternoon, no longer in tactical gear but wearing jeans and a flannel shirt that made him look like any other small-town resident. He walked through the transformed space, taking in the changes with an expression Thomas couldn't quite read. Russo would have approved, Delacroix said finally. This place was always about protecting people. You just found a different way to do it. You're welcome here anytime, Thomas offered. As a friend, not a federal agent. Delacroix smiled. I might take you up on that. I've got family a few counties over. Could stop by when I visit them. As evening fell and families began departing, Thomas found Marcus sitting on the front steps of the Creamery, their home now, undeniably and completely. The boy was watching fireflies begin their evening dance across the overgrown fields they still hadn't fully tamed. Dad? Marcus said without looking away from the lights. Are we going to be okay now? Thomas sat beside his son, their shoulders touching. Yeah, buddy. I think we are. I was really scared, Marcus admitted. When those men came, I thought something bad was going to happen. I was scared too, Thomas said honestly. But we got through it. Together. Because you're brave. Because I had something worth protecting, Thomas corrected. That makes all the difference. They sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged in the darkening sky. Somewhere beneath them, the facility lay sealed and empty, its secrets finally at rest. The land around them, 2 acres of overgrown possibility, waited to be shaped by their hands, by their vision of what this place could become. Thomas thought about the journey that had brought them here. The eviction notice. The desperate auction bid. The discovery that changed everything. The choice to stand rather than run. Each step had felt impossible in the moment, driven by necessity rather than courage. But looking back, he could see the thread connecting them, the thread of a father doing whatever it took to give his son a home. I'm glad we stayed, Marcus said quietly. Even though it was scary. I like it here. Me too, Thomas agreed, and realized he meant it completely. The Creamery stood behind them, solid and permanent, no longer condemned but consecrated by service and sacrifice. The community center they'd built would serve Millbrook Township for years, maybe generations. Children would play basketball on courts installed above a facility that had once hidden federal witnesses. Families would gather in rooms where Vincent Russo had meticulously documented his off-book operation. And through it all, the land would remember. Would hold the stories of everyone who'd passed through, the witnesses seeking second chances, the marshal who'd protected them, the desperate father and son who'd stumbled into legacy and chosen to honor it rather than flee from it. "Come on," Thomas said, standing and offering his hand to Marcus. "Let's go inside. We've got an early morning tomorrow. Mrs. Henshaw wants to schedule youth basketball leagues, and we need to figure out the logistics." Marcus took his father's hand, and together they walked into the building that had become more than shelter. It was home now. Sanctuary. A place where secrets had been kept and finally released, where danger had come and been defeated, where a father and son had learned that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply stay when everything tells you to run. Behind them, the fireflies continued their ancient dance. Above, stars wheeled in patterns that had guided travelers for millennia. And beneath, sealed in concrete and silence, the facility waited, empty now, but forever part of the foundation on which Thomas and Marcus Hayes would build their future. The land had taken its due. Had tested them, challenged them, demanded proof of their commitment. And in return, it had given them exactly what they needed, not just a roof over their heads, but roots deep enough to weather any storm. As they crossed the threshold into warmth and light, Thomas allowed himself to finally, fully believe what had seemed impossible 7 weeks ago. They were home, they were safe, and they were going to be okay. The Riverside Creamery's doors closed behind them, solid and secure, keeping the night at bay. 6 months after the Riverside Community Center opened its doors, Thomas Hayes stood at the edge of the property line where overgrown fields met the tree line, watching the first real snow of winter settle over the land. The transformation had been gradual, almost imperceptible day by day, but looking back he could barely recognize the desperate man who'd arrived here with $700 and a son who'd been sleeping in a car. The fields weren't overgrown anymore. Local farmers had offered to help clear and plant, not for profit, but because that's what communities did when someone was trying to build something worthwhile. What had been 2 acres of neglected wilderness was now a mixture of managed meadow and vegetable gardens that the community center used for youth agriculture programs. Marcus had taken charge of one section, growing vegetables he donated to the county food bank, the same food bank that had helped feed them during their first difficult weeks. Inside the center, Thomas could hear the sounds of Saturday afternoon basketball practice. 12 kids from the middle school, Marcus among them, learning plays from Coach Hendricks, a retired teacher who'd volunteered when he heard about the program. The sound of bouncing balls and teenage laughter echoed through spaces that had once held industrial dairy equipment, federal surveillance gear, and secrets that could have gotten them killed. Thomas's phone buzzed with a text from Delacroix, "Heading through your area next week. Still okay if I stop by?" "Always welcome," Thomas typed back, surprised by how much he meant it. The marshal had become something unexpected, not quite a friend, but more than an acquaintance. Someone who understood what this place had been and what it had become. The snow continued to fall, each flake settling into the earth like small acts of grace. Thomas thought about Vincent Russo, about the man who'd spent 3 decades hiding people in plain sight, who'd died believing his work would be forgotten or erased. Instead, it had become the foundation, literally and figuratively, for something that served the community openly. The sealed facility beneath the center was part of the building's story now, known to Thomas and Marcus and the marshals who'd helped them survive, but otherwise just another layer of history buried in soil that remembered everything. "Dad!" Marcus's voice carried across the field. The boy, not quite a boy anymore, Thomas realized, seeing how much his son had grown in half a year, jogged toward him through the falling snow. "Coach wants to know if we can schedule extra practice time next week. We've got a tournament coming up." "What does the calendar look like?" Thomas asked, though he already knew the answer. The center was booked almost every evening now, basketball leagues, art classes, town council meetings, a weekly quilting circle that Mrs. Henshaw had organized. The space they'd created had become essential infrastructure for a small community that had never had a gathering place before. "We could do early morning," Marcus suggested. "Like 6 a.m. before school?" Thomas pretended to consider this seriously. "That would mean you getting up at 5:30. "I know," Marcus said, unbothered. "But Tyler and Jake are willing to do it too. Coach says we've got a real shot at regionals if we put in the work." The casual confidence in his son's voice was new, or rather, it was something that had been buried under anxiety and instability but had re-emerged as their life settled. Marcus had friends now. Had routines and responsibilities and dreams that extended beyond survival. He'd joined the school's math team, started volunteering at the town library on weekends, even talked about maybe becoming an engineer someday so he could design buildings like his dad had learned to renovate. "Tell Coach I'll open the center at 5:45, Thomas agreed. "But you're responsible for your own alarm clock." Marcus grinned and jogged back toward the building, his footprints dark in the fresh snow. Thomas watched him go, feeling the particular satisfaction of seeing a child thrive despite everything that had tried to break him. The center had given them more than Thomas had anticipated. Not just a home, though the second-floor apartment was comfortable now, properly furnished and warm, but a purpose. Every family that used the basketball court, every kid who discovered a love of art in the classes they offered, every town meeting that solved small community problems, it all felt like evidence that desperate choices could sometimes lead to meaningful outcomes. Winter deepened into the kind of cold that made the old Creamery's brick walls valuable insulation. Thomas spent those months working on interior improvements, refinishing the wooden floors in the meeting rooms, upgrading the kitchen facilities so they could host potlucks and community dinners. Marcus helped when homework allowed, learning carpentry and electrical work, skills that would serve him regardless of what career he eventually chose. Elena Vega sent a letter in February, forwarded through official channels with identifying information redacted but the message clear. She thanked them for their courage, said she'd been following news of the center's opening through carefully monitored internet searches. She'd included a donation, anonymous but substantial, earmarked specifically for youth programs. Thomas used it to start a scholarship fund for kids who wanted to attend summer camps or specialized programs their families couldn't otherwise afford. "She's still out there," Thomas told Marcus when the letter arrived. "Living her life, safe because of what we went through." Marcus, now 12 and increasingly thoughtful about complex moral questions, considered this. "Do you think she feels guilty? That we got stuck in danger because of her?" "I think she probably does," Thomas said honestly. "But guilt for surviving when others suffered isn't rational. She didn't ask to be hunted. We didn't ask to buy a property with a secret facility underneath. Sometimes life just throws impossible situations at people, and all anyone can do is try to come through it with their humanity intact." "Did we?" Marcus asked. "Come through with our humanity intact?" Thomas looked at his son, at this young man who'd hidden behind filing cabinets while armed intruders searched for information that could have gotten them killed, who'd chosen to stay in danger rather than abandon a stranger to her fate. "Yeah," Thomas said firmly. "I think we did." Spring arrived with the kind of dramatic transformation only rural places truly experience. The fields that had been snow-covered and dormant exploded into life, wildflowers in the meadow sections, orderly rows of vegetables in the garden plots, grass so green it seemed artificial in the morning light. The community rallied for a spring festival at the center, celebrating the building's first anniversary with food, music, and a dedication ceremony that drew half the township. Mrs. Henshaw gave a speech about how Vincent Russo had been a quiet pillar of Millbrook Township for decades, how his legacy lived on in the building that now served the community so well. She didn't mention the classified facility, the witness protection operation, the federal intervention that had nearly destroyed the property before it could be transformed. Some secrets were better left buried, allowed to fertilize new growth rather than poisoning it. Thomas found Delacroix standing at the edge of the crowd during the ceremony, wearing civilian clothes and a slight smile that suggested he appreciated the irony of celebrating a place whose true history most attendees would never know. "This is good work," Delacroix said quietly as they watched Marcus laugh with his friends near the basketball court. Russo would have approved. He always believed in second chances, in the idea that people could start over and build something meaningful. "How's Elena?" Thomas asked, keeping his voice low. "Thriving," Delacroix replied. The Costello prosecutions went even better than expected. 18 convictions so far, including the 3 family leaders. The organization is effectively dismantled. She'll never need to testify, never need to fear them finding her. He paused. "She asked me to tell you she named her daughter Sarah." After a woman who once told her that courage is just fear that's learned to keep moving forward. Thomas felt unexpected emotion tighten his throat. Somewhere in Oregon, a woman he'd never met was raising a child, building a life that had nearly been stolen from her. The facility beneath his feet had protected her when official systems failed. His willingness to stand in harm's way had ensured that protection held long enough for the threat to be eliminated. It wasn't glory, wasn't the kind of story anyone would tell in grand terms. But it mattered. "Thank you," Thomas said. "For trusting us. For believing we could handle it." "You gave me no choice," Delacroix replied with wry humor. "You refused to run, insisted on staying, turned a tactical nightmare into functional cover. I just tried to keep you alive while you did it." He grew serious. "But actually, I should thank you. Cases like this, cases where civilians step up despite having every reason to protect themselves first, they remind me why the work matters. Why we keep trying even when the system fails." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the spring festival unfold around them. Children played on the lawn. Adults gathered in conversation clusters that would have been impossible without this space to bring them together. The old creamery stood solid and purposeful, its brick walls warm in the afternoon sun, its windows reflecting a community that had embraced it completely. Summer brought the kind of heat that made the thick walls of the creamery valuable again, keeping interior spaces cool even when temperatures outside climbed into the 90s. Marcus spent mornings helping with the youth agriculture program, afternoons playing basketball, evenings doing homework with new focus because he'd decided engineering school required excellent grades and he was planning accordingly. Thomas took on selective renovation projects for other property owners in the township, building a reputation for quality work and fair prices. The income was steady if not spectacular, enough to cover their expenses and slowly build savings again. More importantly, it integrated him into the community's economic fabric, made him not just the guy who ran the center but a contributing member of the township's working class. One evening in late July, Thomas and Marcus sat on the front steps of the creamery watching sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. They'd developed a habit of these quiet moments, father and son checking in without formal structure, just being present together at the end of days that were full but no longer desperate. "I've been thinking about Mom," Marcus said suddenly, his voice careful. "Not missing her exactly, just wondering why she left." Thomas chose his words with equal care. "Sometimes people aren't ready for the responsibilities they take on. Your mom loved you, I believe that, but she wasn't equipped to be a parent. That's not your fault. It's not even really her fault. It's just the reality of who she was." "Do you ever wish things had worked out differently?" Marcus asked. Thomas considered lying, offering platitudes about everything happening for a reason. But Marcus deserved better than comfortable fiction. "I wish you had a mother who stayed. Who wanted to be part of your life. But I don't wish I was different, or that you were different, or that we'd ended up somewhere other than here. This," he gestured at the building behind them, the field stretching to the tree line, the town visible in the distance, "this is good. Hard-earned and imperfect, but good." Marcus nodded, processing this. "I'm glad we bought the creamery. Even with everything that happened. It's home now." "Yeah," Thomas agreed, feeling the truth of it settle deep. "It is." Autumn arrived with the kind of golden light that made photographers drive for hours hoping to capture it. The Harvest Festival Mrs. Henshaw had mentioned months ago became a major community event, hosted at the center with dozens of families contributing food, crafts, and agricultural displays. Marcus's vegetables took third place in the youth competition. He complained good-naturedly that Tyler's giant pumpkin was obviously the result of genetic engineering, and the prize money went immediately into his college fund. Thomas found himself serving on the Township Council's planning committee, advising on potential development projects and infrastructure improvements. It was the kind of civic engagement he'd never imagined having time or energy for, but here it felt natural. He had expertise, experience, and most importantly, he had stake in the community's future. The sealed facility beneath the center never intruded on their daily lives, but Thomas remained aware of it. Some nights, standing alone in the main gathering space after everyone had gone home, he would think about the people Vincent Russo had hidden there. The witnesses who'd passed through, been given new identities, second chances at life. He wondered if they knew what had become of the place that protected them. If they'd read about the Costello prosecutions and understood they were finally, truly safe. In November, a package arrived addressed to Thomas Hayes with no return address but a postmark from Oregon. Inside was a framed photograph, a woman and a small girl, maybe 2 years old, standing in front of what looked like a community garden. The woman's face was partially obscured by sunglasses and a hat, but her smile was genuine. On the back, in careful handwriting, Sarah and Elena, thriving because strangers chose courage. Thank you. Thomas hung the photograph in his office at the center, position where he could see it but visitors wouldn't ask questions. It became a private reminder of why the difficult choices had mattered, why standing rather than running had been worth the risk. Winter returned, completing the annual cycle. Marcus was now 13, taller, more confident, already talking about high school courses and college applications years in advance. The center had become so integrated into township life that Thomas couldn't imagine Millbrook without it. They'd added evening GED classes for adults, expanded the art program to include pottery and woodworking, even started hosting a monthly farmers market in the warm months. On a clear December evening, Thomas stood in the same spot where he'd watched the first snow fall a year ago. The fields were dormant again, resting before spring would call them back to life. The center glowed with warm light from every window, basketball practice, a town council meeting, an art class, all happening simultaneously in the space they'd created. Marcus joined him at the property line, wearing the heavy coat Thomas had bought him when it became clear last year's wouldn't fit anymore. Coach says I might make varsity next year if I keep improving, he said, breath misting in the cold air. That's great, buddy, Thomas replied, meaning it completely. It's weird, Marcus continued thoughtfully. A year ago we were basically homeless. Now I'm worried about making varsity basketball. How did everything change so fast? Thomas considered the question seriously. I don't think it changed fast. I think we changed it, piece by piece, day by day. Every repair, every person we helped, every choice to build instead of just survive, it added up. The federal agents helped, Marcus pointed out with the practical honesty of teenagers. They did, Thomas agreed. But they gave us a chance to help ourselves. We're the ones who took it. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching lights from the center spill across snow-covered ground. Some were beneath their feet, sealed in concrete and darkness. The facility waited, empty but essential, the foundation on which everything above had been built. Vincent Russo's legacy, transformed from hidden protection into open service. Elena Vega's salvation, purchased with risk that had nearly cost them everything but instead had given them more than they'd imagined possible. I'm proud of us, Marcus said quietly. For not running away. Me too, Thomas replied, one arm around his son's shoulders. Me too. The land remembered everything, the decades of industrial dairy production, the years of secret protection, the moment of danger when federal agents and criminals converged, and now the daily life of a community finding itself at its center. Soil that had seen so much was patient, accepting each layer of history as fertilizer for whatever would grow next. Thomas Hayes had come to this property desperate and afraid, betting everything on a condemned building nobody else wanted. He'd discovered secrets that should have destroyed them, faced threats that could have ended everything, made choices that required more courage than he knew he possessed. And somehow, impossibly, he and Marcus had not just survived but thrived. The center would continue. Children would learn basketball and art and agriculture within walls that once hid people running for their lives. Town meetings would solve community problems in spaces where federal agents had monitored threats. Gardens would grow in soil enriched by years of careful neglect that had kept the facility hidden. And underneath it all, sealed and silent, Vincent Russo's life work would remain, not erased, not forgotten, but transformed into foundation. A reminder that protection takes many forms, that courage isn't always loud, that sometimes the most important thing one person can do is stand firm when everything suggests running. Thomas turned back toward the building, Marcus walking beside him, their footsteps crunching in fresh snow. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new moments to choose building over surrendering. But tonight, they had warmth and light and purpose. They had home. The Riverside Community Center's doors stood open, welcoming anyone who needed what it offered: space, safety, belonging. The land beneath held its secrets close, patient and permanent. And above, in the gathering darkness, stars emerged one by one, bearing witness to a place reborn not despite its history but because of it. Legacy, Thomas had learned, isn't about erasing the past or pretending difficult times didn't happen. It's about acknowledging what came before, honoring the sacrifices others made, and building something worthy on the foundation they left. Vincent Russo had protected people in darkness and secrecy. Thomas and Marcus were protecting people with light and openness. Different methods, same essential purpose: creating spaces where people could become who they were meant to be. As they crossed the threshold into warmth, leaving winter night behind, Thomas allowed himself one final glance back at the fields, the tree line, the land that had tested them and ultimately accepted them. This was home now, truly and completely. Not despite what had happened here, but in some strange way because of it. The door closed softly behind them. Inside, life continued, basketball bouncing, voices discussing zoning regulations, brushes moving across canvas. Outside, snow continued falling, each flake a small grace, covering the ground in white that would nourish spring growth. And beneath everything, the facility waited in darkness, its purpose fulfilled, its legacy secured not through recognition but through transformation. The land remembered. The soil knew. And in the quiet way of rural places where roots run deep and legacy is never taken for granted, the Riverside Community Center stood as proof that desperate choices, made with courage and sustained with conviction, could become foundations for futures worth building. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.